Welcome back to the show today. We are talking all about the San Antonio Spurs and what I'm calling Spurs culture. A few weeks ago, I talked about Heat culture and how I thought the Heat were the only team in the NBA with a real ethos or a defined set of values or principles that they operate by. But enough people pointed out that the Spurs definitely have their own school of thought about how they do things. And they're right. I was wrong. The San Antonio Spurs are a special organization who have the championship banners to prove that their way of thinking is effective. Since 1999, they've won 5 championships, which is more than any other team besides the Lakers, of course. Their win percentage has been above 71%, and they made the playoffs for a 22-year streak. No other team did that. This is all coming from a team that is not a free agent destination because the women in San Antonio aren't pretty. I'm kidding. I'm sure every woman in San Antonio is beautiful in her own way. Now that I've established that the San Antonio Spurs are a special team and no one's been as good as them for the last 20 years, let's talk about the consistent elements of the organization, starting with Gregg Popovich. Gregg Popovich was hired as the head coach in 1996, and he won his first championship in 1999. And that was the Spurs' first championship as an organization. So, needless to say, I think a big part of the Spurs' success has been Gregg Popovich. But if you asked him, he'd probably say what he said to a reporter back in 2021. He'd say, draft Tim Duncan and try to stay alive. Of course, Pop is being humble, but in some ways, he's kind of right. Since Tim Duncan retired, the best record they've had is 48-34. And after that 22-year playoff streak was broken, they haven't made the playoffs since. So as much as that playoff success is owed to Gregg Popovich, it's as much owed to Tim Duncan. In fact, Tim Duncan is the only player in NBA history to record 1,000 wins with a single team. Tim Duncan is ranked the 8th greatest basketball player of all time according to ESPN. So regardless of what you think of that ranking, maybe you're a Lakers fan and you think Shaq and Kobe are better than Tim Duncan, he is a great player. This brings me to my first value of the San Antonio Spurs: humility. Tim Duncan was the #1 pick in the 1997 draft, and he made an all-star team his rookie year. Only like 10 people have done that before. But Duncan refused special treatment. He was quoted as saying, "I just want to be like everyone else." Duncan had immediate success in the league. He was finals MVP his second year in the league. He was only 22 years old, but he never let these achievements get to his head. It would have been really easy for him to start demanding more shots and more usage, but he was always willing to facilitate the game in whatever it needed. Duncan throughout his entire career never averaged more than 25 points, and he let the game just be what it was. He let the game occur naturally, and naturally the Spurs were winners. This is another aspect of Spurs culture: faith. If you have faith that your coaches and your teammates are going to work hard for you, you are going to work hard for your teammates. You will not find the need to force bad shots or bad plays. If you're patient and you do right by the people around you, things will unfold the way that they're supposed to. Duncan's nickname was the Big Fundamental. I always thought that was the lamest nickname of all time. But now that I'm older, I think it's awesome. It just means that Duncan knew to work hard and make the right play. He did not play basketball that drew attention to himself. His signature move was a bank shot. Let's keep it real. A swish is way cooler than a bank shot. But if you practice the bank shot and you know the geometry of it, it's a far more effective shot. Doing the research for this video and watching a bunch of Tim Duncan highlights, I noticed that Jokic's style in the post is very similar to Duncan. It's intuitive and it's slow, and dare I say, it's kind of boring. Now I know Jokic obviously adds a lot more flair to his game with his tricky passes, but this slow style of play does not make the top 10 every night. Watch a Tim Duncan highlight reel, it kinda sucks. The counterpoint to that though is Duncan was so consistent. He played over 90% of the games in his career. Boring basketball is effective and sustainable. So it brings up a really interesting paradox. Being a high flyer like Zion Williamson or Derrick Rose is really good for the league. People like that shit. We can't do it. It's truly amazing to watch. But it isn't good for the long-term health of the player because it's so taxing on the body. I admit it, I like a violent dunk more than I like a bank shot. But when I see LeBron lay it up when he could have jumped 4 feet in the air and do a tomahawk, I gotta respect it. One last thing about Tim Duncan. I want to talk about his relationship with his mentor, David Robinson. David Robinson was no slouch. He was a perennial All-NBA player and he had an MVP under his belt. The only reason the Spurs were bad enough that they got the #1 pick with Tim Duncan was because David Robinson was injured and he was out the previous year. David Robinson was also a #1 pick, and both Tim Duncan and David Robinson played 4 years in college. In fact, Robinson not only did 4 years in college, he served in the military for a year as a commitment that he had made to the Naval Academy. He forwent starting his lucrative basketball career to serve his country. I'm not necessarily a pro-military or even a pro-college person, but I respect someone that has principles and values and doesn't compromise on them. Robinson was quoted as saying that Tim Duncan had no sense of entitlement when he went to the Spurs. Popovich and Robinson were as critical on on Duncan as they were on any player on the team. Robinson also practiced humility. He was willing to be the second highest tower in the Twin Towers. That was the nickname, the two of them. As Duncan gained more experience, Robinson's points per game decreased as he assumed a lesser role on the team. His humility may have kept him off a couple all-star teams, but it did get him 2 championships. All right, now this is truly the last thing about Duncan, okay? Kobe and Duncan retired the same year. Kobe announced his retirement at the beginning of the season, so that Lakers season became sort of a farewell tour for Kobe. Every away game was packed out with Kobe fans trying to blow him a kiss goodbye. Duncan announced his retirement after the season. You can look at this as Duncan depriving his fans the ability to see him one last time, and maybe Timmy does too, but that is his style. Positive attention or negative attention, he never drew it to himself. Now let's go back to Pop. Pop has a great relationship with every player he's ever coached, and a lot of the ones he hasn't. Part of a good relationship is the ability to be honest and speak your mind without the fear of the other person's reaction. This is a video of Pop screaming at Danny Green to shut the fuck up. Doesn't look like Danny's taking it too personally. This is a video of Pop yelling at Kawhi, who was the best player on the team because he messed up a play. Here's a video of him yelling at Tiago Splitter for his sloppy defense, and he's immediately subbing him out. How does he keep guys from either cussing him out in return or getting in their own heads? It's because Gregg Popovich loves them, and they know that. He makes a point to get to know every player on his team. He knows about their family, what food they like, where they grew up. He even does research on the things that the players are interested, so he has something to connect on them with. One of the Spurs assistant coaches says that the team actually eats together as much as they play together. They go out to restaurants 2 or 3 times a week, and Pop literally scrapbooks the menus and the wine labels from the restaurants. Another observation you'll make about Pop is he's very physically affectionate with his players. He talks to them very closely. He feels very comfortable making physical contact with them, and the players don't seem uncomfortable at all. I don't know about you, but I don't let people touch me like that unless I really trust them. He also hugs every player he's ever coached after they've left or been traded. Even Kawhi Leonard, who had a particularly tumultuous end with the Spurs organization. Pop is truly happy to see this guy, and Kawhi kinda looks happy, it's hard to tell. This is the biggest value for the Spurs, is trust. Pop lets his players know that his relationship with them is bigger than the game of basketball, and no matter what, he's got their backs. And when developing strong bonds as human beings is a priority, and holding each other accountable is a priority, success will come. Okay, call the draft rigged, or maybe it is, I don't care. Victor Wembanyama ended up right where he needs to be. Not because of his remarkable stature and skill, but because of his attitude. I fell in love with Wemby when he was on JJ Redick's podcast, and he was talking about his life, and how he wanted to grow not just as a basketball player, but as a human being.
When I need motivation, when I need energy and I feel tired out, when I need to fight on the court and it's hard, I always remember I'm free in that universe. I do whatever I can, and I know what I want to do, and nothing's going to stop me from doing it. And I always got that in mind, and it doesn't just stop to basketball. You know, it's about life.
Man.
Victor sees himself as a 3-dimensional person. Basketball is just an avenue to push himself and see how far he can go. He does not want to be the greatest of all time. He wants to push himself to be the best version of Victor Wembanyama. This is why I like the Spurs, because they don't play to win. They play to see how high of a standard they can set. I know that was a very small sliver of Spurs culture. I didn't get into how funny Pop is and kind of the joy being a value type thing, but Pop is very funny, so go watch a compilation of Pop being funny, because he's pretty great. Because something about not taking himself too seriously. I may do a video on that sometime. I don't know. Be good to your corn dogs. Eat your mother.